So the topic that we'll just touch upon briefly this morning is wake up with God, go to sleep with God, fill your day with God. This is the way, actually, that's the continuation of it from Swami Sivananda. This is the way to God. And this is what we're doing, actually. And in ashram setup, it is very easy. Easy. I don't know how easy it was today. Swami Brahmananda had to walk around and just dig some people, I don't know, from their beds or something. Like 6 o'clock, like maybe 5 people here. But you made it. So I was just reading a little bit about how Swami Sivananda, his day was, just a little bit of it. Swami Sivananda was a realized saint, but the way he got there, obviously he must have done, I don't know how many lifetimes, a lot of sadhana, to be able in his last incarnation to reach that state of becoming a Jivan Mukta, realized saint. But even then, we know about 15 years that he did very severe sadhana, but then when he started like more with the ashram, he was able and was practicing the presence of the divine in every possible way. So there are a few anecdotes. So we can get inspiration, we can read, we can hear about Swami Sivananda. This is the first thing, to have inspiration. That is part of having satsanga. If not in his presence, alive, I believe that there is no one here that actually met Swami Sivananda, right? He passed on in 63. But to get the inspiration and see to what extent we can incorporate it into our own life. So in the ashram we have daily reminders. People need to get to satsang, so we have morning, evening satsang, practice, personal practice, or within a class, and we study. All this is there, but the question is to what extent we really assimilate it and make it our own. So it is not just remaining on the intellectual level, which is very important, it's a good start, right? Then inspiration comes, but really to make it our own in the sense that at some point we will have the blessing and the grace of experiencing it deep, deep in our heart. And definitely Swami Sivananda, when we hear about him, when he himself is writing, and in one of his books, beautiful book, I mentioned it, I think last satsang, in the Hours of Communion, it's a little book that we may still have in the boutique. Swami Sivananda writes different poems. And just by reading it, you already yourself, myself, or anyone, like, it is already an inspiration, and we can feel that he was in a different state of consciousness. And from there it comes. So Swami Sivananda would start the day with different oblations, of course taking a shower, the things that we learn to practice and to suggest to others, to teach others whenever necessary. He would wake up very early, like 3:30 to 4 o'clock. For most of us, it can be pushing it a little bit, especially even if we live in an ashram, and life in the ashram, as you know, especially if you're a staff or karma yogi, it's quite intense. So he would wake up at 3:30 to 4 o'clock. By 6:30, he was done with his own sadhana, with his own practice. And he specifies a whole list of different mantras and different kinds of, he would do like one mala to many, many deities. And this was his regular thing, probably in the later years. And even when he couldn't do asanas in a regular way, though you will not see anything, but we have different pictures of Swami Sivananda actually doing asanas when he's already quite advanced and he suffered from all kinds of ailments. He's still doing whatever he can. And in this writing about him, toward the end of his life, he could not even go out of his bed by himself. The body was really going through a lot, so he had assistants that were doing it, but he still, when he was in bed, he was still doing some asanas. And when people had any problem with pranayama, then he would recommend do it pranayama, not just 4, 16, 8, but inhale as much as you can, hold as much as you can, and so on. But his idea was to continue with the practice regardless of in what state of body we are. And state of mind, just the determination to do it would already elevate us. So I cannot go over the whole day, but just a little bit. So Swami Sivananda actually was waking up at Brahma Muhurta, the hour of the gods, with the sunrise. Here sometimes, according to the change with the, with the clock, we wake up at Brahma Muhurta. But the way that Swami Vishnu established, our direct guru, was 5:30 wake up, and then 6 is satsang. And if we can live with that, it is already a wonderful beginning. One of the things that was very interesting, Swami Sivananda was very meticulous in fulfilling certain, apart from his sadhana, just the duties, guiding people, instructing them, going over letters, because he was very systematic answering. People would address him with all kinds of questions. He wouldn't just shove it away. Sometimes when we do it nowadays with some emails that we don't want to read, so we just ignore them. Swami Sivananda wasn't doing it. He went over everything. And then when he would, when his assistants, the ashramis that were doing this work, were showing him an address of someone or going over a letter, then the completion of it was each letter, each address, he would say, Om Tat Sat, that thou art. You are the pure consciousness. And when a yogi like Swami Sivananda says it, it's already a blessing. Yeah? But we can relate to it on some level. Of course, the intellect doesn't really hold much of it. But there is something which goes beyond, even when we chant daily, in the daily chants. Just the last verse, Anandoam. So maybe sometimes we can actually relate. It is beyond the body, beyond the mind that is troubling us, because beyond the pains and aches and sorrows of the daily life. In essence, it is a reminder. So we do it satsang, right? Singing in satsang morning, satsang evening. So this is already beginning of the day and the end of the day. And even if at home, those of you who don't live in an ashram, you go back home, see what kind of practice you can establish that you will do it upon waking up after you take a shower. You know why you take a shower in the morning? Sleep is tamas. And by showering, we're purifying the body, even if you took a shower in the evening, not because you are dirty or anything, it's energetically. So this prepares us for the practices. So we can start with a little bit of meditation. Swami Sivananda would say, if you don't have much time, then a little bit of the different practices will create a wholesome practice. So of course in the ashram there's the luxury, like an hour and a half the classes these days. Yeah, an hour and a half classes in TTC. You have longer. You have it 2 hours in the morning, right? But when you go back home, you may not be able to implement it in this way. So do it in whatever way you can. But remember, whether we're doing asanas or pranayama, all this knowledge comes from a very high place. So just by doing these practices and reminding ourselves where it comes from, it's already be in a higher vibration. This is the inner connection. And of course, chanting. Swami Sivananda was votary of chanting. When he did his India tour, which went on, I think, for 2.5 months, thousands and thousands of people would come because when you hear him, even, you can find few recordings on YouTube. Just his voice was wake up. I wake up also the dead, I think, just to be in this ecstasy. So it was ecstasy. It wasn't the excitement, like we get high, 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 and then low, low, low. No, this wasn't the kind of ecstasy. It was real ecstasy, taking you beyond. So different things were going on in the ashram. So Swami Sivananda would talk to devotees and visitors present. So he had few times during the day, he had his breakfast, at the same time. He would do the writing at the same time, do the office work at the same time. And then there were periods in between. There was some short rest. There was a lot of pranayama before the different activities. And again, when we're engaged in these practices, the vibration goes up. There is more sattva. More sattva, it is a reminder of something of a higher nature. But then he would have time for his visitors and giving directions to his disciples and anyone in the ashram. And one of the things that I think probably we know from his writing and the writing about him was giving. Swami Sivananda was called Swami Givananda. He would always walk around with books, pamphlets and books. Actually, Swami Vishnu, in a sense, whenever we had any visitors in the ashram, Swami Vishnu, he would send someone to take a whole package of, Bliss Divine and Companion, Meditation and Mantras, or any other book that just came out from the organization. He would send people home with a whole package of these books. So part of his time was definitely dedicated to allow people to come to him, to communicate and to give them advice. So we may not be high there, but with our own experience and things that we have learned and assimilated into our life, to whatever extent it is, we can support others. And this is very important. Not just intellectually. Swami Sivananda wasn't doing it from here. He was doing it from the depth of his heart, whatever he was doing. When there was a very sick person in the ashram, people would walk around. He suddenly saw some of his disciples, instead of going the regular path to reach some location, he saw them like walking around, and he saw one after another. He didn't understand what was going on. So one of the residents of the ashram, maybe a Swami, an older person, was very sick. So they didn't want to even to get close there. Swami Sivananda, what did he do? He went directly there and personally took care of the person. So it wasn't just giving the teachings, the high teachings, scriptures, all this that is going on. He wasn't lecturing much, by the way. It is said just when in the ashram they had a special celebration, like pujas or Guru Purnima or other, he would talk to about 10, 15 minutes. Much of his knowledge comes through his books. And any book of Swami Sivananda that we pick up and we open it, the whole teaching is there. Any Vedantic chant in the little chant book, the whole teaching is there. Just a question to what extent we are ready and capable of implementing it. So and after this morning work, actually I was doing the work in the morning office and so on, and then there was a satsang. So the satsang would conclude with a prayer. Swami Sivananda was present, keeping in which his axiom, his saying was, start the day with God, end the day with God, and fill the day with God. For Gurudev, prayer seemed to be the very breath of his life. And this is something, much of what Swami Sivananda was doing is something that we can do. We can repeat the mantra, we can have the japa as the background of our mind, and we can pray. in whatever we're engaged throughout the day, whether we're working in the garden or cooking, food will be much higher vibration if the cooks and the karma yogis there will be chanting or repeating the mantras, because the subtle part of the food is building our mind and the grosser building our body. So there are many opportunities throughout the day, not just in an ashram. How about when you go back home, let us say before you start your day, you do some of the sadhana that we're talking about, but also throughout the day, just take occasionally a little pause, maybe a little japa, just the repetition of the mantra. If you have, I don't know, half an hour break or something in the middle of the work, maybe take a walk, repeat the mantra. You are taking care of your family and cooking for them, or doing whatever you are doing. Have you ever tasted some good, yummy food that your grandmother or someone that you love made? Well, I didn't meet any grandmother in this lifetime, but my mom was good enough. Anyone? That's it? All the rest of you never tasted something? Oh my God, we have to remedy this. They are too tired. Okay. So what comes there? What goes into it? Just the recipe, if there was any, because usually grandmother would say a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? Just to put some spices or whatever. It is the love that comes through the food. Yeah? So this is something we can do to have this intention. Yes, a kitchen can be a very hectic and very stressful place, but maybe we can do something even before going into the kitchen. I'm talking ashram kitchen can be very stressful, and intend to have a peaceful place. Yeah? Swami Sivananda would say the whole Maya, the whole illusion that we live in is right in the kitchen. Because as the food is cooking, the rajas is going up, the pitta is going out, the fire is going up. So can we pacify it? And any attempt to bring the mind into a peaceful place is already tuning to something of a higher nature. So Gurudev prayer seemed to be the very breath of his life. No work would he start or end without prayer. Can we do it? Yes, no, maybe. I mean, the TTCs are totally overwhelmed. We all told them about the third week and they decided to live it, like fully. TTC meaning the teachers' trainees. Those who are doing the teachers' trainings. So we can do the prayer. I told in the past the stuff, I've heard it. We were in Swami Vishnu's house. It was like many years back. Swami just left his body in 93, I think. It was, anyway, between 89 and 93. And they needed a tape recorder, just a new one. There was one, just was broken. And someone bought one and brought it to his room in the Samadhi estate. And they wanted to open it and put a cassette. It was the cassette age, a few thousand years ago, cassettes. Yeah. And Swamiji said, no, bring me the powders. So on this box, boombox you call it, on this tape recorder, he did a little puja. He applied the powders because for him, for Swami Vishnu, what was coming through this plastic box was actually the knowledge Saraswati. So he related to it as Saraswati. There are many, many opportunities throughout the day that we can do that. I remember, I think this first time I met Swamiji, it was in 85, yeah. And we had a special program with him. It was in Israel. And we were going to the dining hall. So they had just in front of the stairs, there was a statue made of a rock, like a plate, and something that we call it a Shivalinga. But whoever made it had no idea. Like he had some inspiration, but not related to it. And Swami Prema and me were walking like behind Swamiji, and then Swamiji says, "Oh, Shivalingam." This is what he saw there. He didn't see just a statue. He already saw the symbol of God. And then we all went, everyone was probably hungry, feeding you twice a day. And before we started, what Swami Vishnu did, he didn't start to eat. He took the bread, made it into small crumbs, went out to the little veranda that was just, adjoined to the dining hall, and distributed it to the birds. Only then he sat and ate. This was his way. And whenever we would come to visit him, you had to have some juice and some mango. Yeah? If you didn't, you were in trouble. This is how he would receive the people that were coming to him. Because he was seeing something other than just feeding. I mean, we were fed in the ashram. So, a reminder how we can relate to it. That's another one. He was always immersed in God's thought, Swami Sivananda. When people around him indulge in idle talk and gossip, which happens very frequently among humans, yes? Not in the ashram, ever, right? Gurudev would utter to himself, Ram, 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 as if it were an admonition, and immediately silence would prevail. He didn't, talk to anyone. He was just repeating the divine name, and just that made a shift, and people became silent. These are things that we can do. Even if we initially just do it as just a practice, eventually it becomes a way of life. And our time is done. Yeah, that's for this morning.